good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here at the showroom at Roth Living here in Denver. My name is Chef Ben Davis. I'm the executive chef here at the Denver branch of Roth Living, and we're here to basically give you a use and care class on your Wolf E or M series wall ovens, kind of exploring them in depth so you'll know exactly what the oven is doing when you're using it, and also how to take care of the oven. And we'll also talk a little bit about the use and care of your sub-zero refrigeration systems. So if you have any questions or things like that coming up later, we can certainly answer them about sub-zero as well. But what we're really going to do today is do a deep exploration of just what your oven will be doing when you're using it. Hopefully it will help you as you come into this holiday season and you're ready to do a lot of baking and roasting and entertaining and all of those things. We hope that will give you enough information to make it very clear for you when you're using those appliances. We're going to make sure that you can ask questions. So there is a chat feature on the Zoom call that you can use. My showroom manager here at the in the Denver showroom, Lynn Thielen, is behind the camera, if you will, and she will be directing the questions to me. So please ask them in real time and we will respond to you in kind. We'll try to make sure we repeat the questions so everybody on the call can hear them for your own education purposes. So please ask as many questions as possible. Nothing can be too basic or too simple, if you will, on the question. So please make sure you get those questions answered, because that's what we're here for. What we'll do today is we'll talk a little bit about the design of the oven, so we all are speaking in the same language when we're referring to different elements or different cooking modes. We want to make sure that everybody is on that same page, so we're all understanding it as well. And then as we go through that, we'll talk about just the design, how to take the racks in and out in the easiest way, and then about caring for them and all of those good things. So let's just hope we get all of your questions answered in the next hour or so, and we'll make sure that we address them all as we go forward. All right, so we're going to start by talking about the ovens, right? The E and M series wall ovens, whether you have a single oven or a double oven, they're all going to basically have the same basic design, right? There's a couple of changes between the M and the E, but really when we're talking about cooking modes, we're talking about the rack design and all of those things, we're really very, very similar in both. So let's just kind of look at both of the ovens side by side. We have some here on the wall behind us. We'll kind of explore them in depth as we open up. Here is our double M and here's our double E right next to it. You'll notice that around us, you may see some other appliances sort of down the way. Those are just different finishes, different designs, whether it's transitional, contemporary, or professional, but you'll see a lot of different ones. But basically, we're going to get a good representation of both styles of ovens right here. So as you can see, and when they're open, you can see that each of the ovens has 6 rack positions. And in the Wolf tradition, with all of our wall ovens, whether it be these convection ovens or it's maybe our convection steam oven, all of our racks are numbered and they always start at the bottom and they go to the top. So whenever we refer to a rack position, whether we're baking, roasting, any of those things, we're always going to talk about the first position rack is always going to be the very bottom of the oven, and the top of the oven is going to be number 6. This is important because when we talk about where the elements in the oven are located, we want to be very cognizant of where the heat source is primarily coming from, so we don't scorch or burn things during a baking or roasting process. So those numbers are very important when we're talking about rack placement for different types of preparations inside the oven. Okay, so again, always remember bottom to top from the lowest number to the highest number. All right, so that's the first thing we want to make sure we make sure we know that. Let's talk about the positions of the different elements, because as we talk about the different modes in the oven, and we talk about modes are like bake, roast, convection, bake, convection, roast. When we talk about those different modes, we always talk about the different elements that are employed to create that perfect cooking environment, right, in the oven, so that we can get the best possible results, so we can predict how our food is going to turn out, knowing what the oven is going to do. So we need to know where the elements are located and what we have them named. So when we're referring to them, we're all talking about the same thing. So the largest element in the oven is below the floor. We call that the bake element. That oven is 4,300 watts in either oven. You've got 4,300 watts of power. So it's the single largest and most powerful element in your oven, right? Below the floor, that's the bake element, right? The second element that both ovens have is that broiler element, which is recessed into the ceiling. The nice thing about this is it's recessed up into the ceiling so it doesn't protrude down into the oven cavity. So you lose no headspace inside the oven. You get full use of the oven cavity itself. That broiler element, as we call it, right, is going to be used primarily when we're broiling, but we do employ it in other modes for getting a little extra browning. When we're talking about doing a roast or some types of baking, we want a little extra top browning. So we oftentimes employ that broiler element to do that, right? And we'll talk about that more in a second. And then the last two elements are concealed behind the back wall. They surround the convection fans that are behind the wall. Each one of those elements in the back is about 2,100 watts. So combined, when both of those elements are employed, we have the equivalent power that we would get if we were just using the baking element by itself. So both of the ovens have the fans recessed in the back walls. The difference is on your M series oven, the fans are in the corners behind the back plate, so you can't see them at all. Whereas on your E series oven over here, you can see the fans through the back wall, but those are also surrounded by their own element. So when we're using those convection elements, we're creating all that heat from the back part of the oven. It's not coming from either the top or the bottom. It's purely coming from behind the items that you're cooking. And that's going to be very important when we start talking about the use of convection in any of our baking or roasting procedures as we go forward. So there's the schematic of both the ovens is the same. Bake element on the bottom, broiler elements on the top, and then two elements surrounding each fan in the back of the oven. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about the racks, right, and how it's easy to take them in and out. There are some slight differences between the designs of the oven and how the racks are then manipulated in and out of the oven. You'll notice that on your M series oven, you will be given two full extension glide racks on these ball bearings, right? So you'll get two of those. And on the E series oven, you'll get one, and then you'll get two of these standard glide racks in the E series. So let's talk a little bit about the E series oven first, right? What you'll notice is on your standard racks, you'll see that the front bar here in the front, right, is slightly different on the two racks. On the bottom one, you'll see that this portion of the rack is slightly upturned. That's designed to go in the bottom rack of the oven in position number 1, so that when you're roasting a large item like a turkey or a prime rib and you're using the entire oven cavity, this allows you to easily grasp this rack and slide it out onto these stainless steel glides that are placed on the door so that the rack does not scratch the finish, the enamel finish on the inside of the door. So you can slide it fully out and then put a nice big roasting pan on here and not worry about anything damaging your oven door. This will accept up to 50 pounds of weight before it causes the door to go into any sort of distress. So most of you probably will never roast anything quite that large, but this does make it nice and easy to baste or to turn or to manipulate whatever it is you're cooking. So this one with the upturned rack goes in rack position 1 at the bottom of the oven, right? Your glide rack can then go anywhere you'd like into the oven. And with a glide racks in our E series oven, this is going to be true for both ovens, but let's demonstrate it on the E series first. You're going to notice that it has some little glides on the side of each one of the racks. Those are for inserting the rack into the oven. What I have found is that over time, the easiest way to remove the rack when you want to change positions or move it in the oven is the easiest way to remove it is to extend the rack fully, then grip the rack near the back of the glides, lift it up slightly, and then just slide it out so that it is fully free in the oven. And you'll notice that on the E series, the little glides are here on the sides of these ball bearing mechanism. So you want to make sure that when you return it, instead of trying to return this to the oven with the glides extended, it's much easier to grip them near the front so that it is fully closed. Then place those glides at about a 15 to 20 degree angle onto the rack position that you would like. Slide it in slightly and then just push it forward, and now it's fully installed. Just like the other standard rack, this rack can accept 50 pounds of weight on it before it begins to tip and things might slide out. So you can see that's true with our glide rack. And then the other rack, you can see that the handle in the front is now flat as opposed to upturned on the bottom. So this can be positioned anywhere else you'd like in the oven, and they're easily removed by just lifting up slightly and then taking it out, just like that. Okay. So on your M series oven, it's going to be very, very similar, but I do recommend that you put one of your 2 glide racks in the lower position on the oven. You can see that will extend out fully, giving you an easy time to do any kind of basting or manipulating of the item in the oven. So you can always put this low in the rack. And again, it will also accept 50 pounds of weight. You'll notice that on the M series oven, there's a slightly different design to the rack. There's a slight curve to the back of the rack. This is just because of the design of the oven. We've been able to expand the rack slightly so you can put larger pieces of cookware and things like that, roasting ware, bakeware, onto this pan, right? So it's always good to put your rack in the lowest position. And then you can position either one of these 2 racks wherever you'd like in the rest of the oven. You had your standard rack, which again, just like on the E series, slides out, lifts up very easily and is removed. And also just like that on the glide rack, you just lift up with the fully extended rack. But now you notice that the glides that are going to go on to the side racks are these on the bottom of your ball bearing glide. So again, grip it near the front so it's fully closed, lift up so that you just putting that small glide onto the side racks, push it back slightly, and then it'll just slide in and hop over. And there you go, you've got them infinite. So that's the easiest way to take them in and out. Trying to insert the rack when the glides are fully extended can be quite an ordeal, especially if the rack is hot. So you want to make sure that you have it closed when you insert it and fully open when you remove it to reposition it in the oven. So there we go. We got all that kind of about the racks and all of that kind of stuff. There's one more interior function that we need to discuss, and that's the placement for your probe, your oven probe. Both ovens, all these ovens come with a probe receptacle. On your E series, you can see that the probe receptacle is here on the right-hand side. One second, we got a question coming in. Yes, Lynn.
What are those currently set at?
On the M series.
Yeah.
So in the M series, right, the question was, where are the rack, what's the rack position numbers that it's currently set at? I have it at 1, 3, and 5. All right, so 1, 3, 5, just the odd numbers. It's really easy to remember. I really like this configuration. It gives me a lot of nice headspace at the top. If I want to do some broiling, obviously I can put the glide rack in rack position 3, but rack position 3 is an ideal position for single plain baking, for just doing a single tray of something. And then obviously having this in the lowest position, if I'm going to do any kind of roasting or heavy duty baking, I can always use that first position. So 1, 3, 5 is an ideal configuration in either one of the ovens for kind of multi-use of the oven positions. All right. Okay. So again, back to the probe. Like I said, each oven comes with its own temperature probe for doing some roasting, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But the receptacle for the probe and on either oven is in a slightly different position. On your E series oven, it's here on the wall on the right, about I don't know, 9/10 of the way up the wall on the right, and it has a little cover on it. And so you have to just flip that cover up and then insert the probe whenever you want to use it into that receptacle, just like that. Okay. Now on your M series, a little different. We're going to come to the roof of the oven, and it's on the opposite side or the left-hand side of the oven. There is no cover, so you just find it and then just push it straight in, and that accepts the probe. And so now you're ready to go and use your temperature probe. But you'll find that they're in slightly different places. Again, on the left in the upper, on the ceiling in the E, on the M, excuse me, and then on the wall on the right in the E. So slightly different, but the probe is going to function exactly the same way. And we'll talk a little bit more about using your probe as we go through the different cooking modes in your oven. All right. So there we go. We've got kind of a schematic design. Now, everybody's controls are going to be slightly different depending on the design features that you've incorporated into your kitchen. So you might have, as in this case with the M series, a professional style of interface, which includes these knobs, right? These knobs control both the cooking mode and then the temperature mode. All other operations within the oven, like setting the lights on or off, or changing the time on the clock, which obviously we all just did over the last 24 to 36 hours. We've all switched that up, but they're going to be a little bit different on this. We're going to control the mode by selecting it with this left hand knob. It's going to control the right hand, the upper oven in this case. We're going to set it to the mode we like, and then we change the temperature here, which displays on this touch screen. And then when we're ready to go, we'll just touch the start, and that will start it. With your E series, it's going to be pretty much the same interface on all trim styles. So you're not going to have to worry about knobs versus touch screen. It's all going to be these etched letters and numbers. Excuse me, here we got another question.
The probes,
are
the M series and the convection steam oven the same probes?
They are not. So the question is, if you own a convection steam oven, in addition to an M or an E series oven, are the probes the same? They are not, right? You will notice the difference. It's very easy to tell that the probe for your wall oven, your E or M series oven, will always have a blue cladding on the cable on the oven. It matches the interior finish on your oven. Your convection steam oven has a black clad probe, so it doesn't really match the stainless steel, obviously, but it is definitely black. So that will be only able to be used in your convection steam oven. Same is true for this. If you try to use the blue clad probe in your CSO, it will not function. They look very similar. However, if you look very closely at the tip that goes into the oven, that is inserted into the receptacle on the side of the oven, it's a little bit of a different design. So while it will fit, it will not function properly. You won't get an accurate reading. So you want to make sure blue goes for your wall ovens at all times. Use that blue probe. Okay. So again, on your E series, the interface is all the etched letters and numbers here on the panel. So you just choose whatever mode you would like to use, whether it's roast. You then check, and by changing the temperature, you can change it on the number panel over to the right. So if I wanted to do a 400-degree roast oven, I would just type in 400, and then you just hit enter, and that will set it in motion and ready to go, right? So that's how the different interfaces are all going to be a little bit different, but we're all going to select our mode first, whether we want to use the preset temperature, and there's going to be a preset temperature with every cooking mode in the ovens. You can obviously modify that at any time. So you can choose what temperature is best suited for whatever preparation you're going to be doing. So we're just going to clear that up now and get that done. So let's close these up and let's talk a little bit about those cooking modes, right? We like to joke, here sometimes at the showroom that, some people come in and tell us that, we really could have just made an oven that had one type of cooking style, bake, and it would only have one temperature, 350, because everybody sort of uses that as the universal way to cook. Bake 350, I can cook a chicken at that temperature. I can bake some cookies, maybe I can bake a cake, do some brownies, all those kinds of things, kind of a universal way, thinking that I understand what baking means, and I think 350 seems like a reasonable temperature for doing that in. Well, we obviously didn't feel that was going to be the best way to go about it, so we actually give you 10 different cooking modes in your two ovens, all divided between the still modes, the modes where the fans are not being employed to heat the oven or cook the food, and the convection mode where fan is always employed. Do you have another question, Lynn?
Yeah, we have a customer, her probe melted a little bit,
Uh-huh.
where it was like touching, like meat.
Could have touched a rack or could have touched a pan, yes.
Does that kind of ring true? Like if it touches something, it might melt a little bit?
It shouldn't, right? The probe should not melt unless it comes in contact with something extremely hot, and it would have to be either the racks were superheated or it might have actually come in contact with perhaps the broiler element. It might have touched the broiler element a little bit. In certain cases, the broiler element is being employed during a process that is not a broiling process. So that probe could have touched the broiler element up in the ceiling. It might have gotten looped up a little bit. It might have touched it. That might have melted a little bit of the cladding on it. You'll know if your probe is not functioning because you won't be able to change the temperature on your probe. So if you've inserted the probe and you want to set it to say, do a medium rare prime rib, and it won't allow you to change the temperature on the probe setting, then your probe is probably faulty at that point. Fortunately, it's not your oven, it's just the probe, which is a much easier thing to replace. So that could be a problem if it melted into the wiring inside.
And when we're talking about some of these modes, will you talk about kind of how to use the probe?
Absolutely. We will definitely talk about the use of the probe in the different cooking modes. So again, 10 different cooking modes divided loosely into two categories, still and convection, right? Still, obviously, no fans are being employed during the cooking process, and convection when the fans are going to be employed in a certain way during the cooking process, right? So very important to understand that during a preheat cycle in either oven, the fans will be engaged to preheat the oven. This helps accelerate the preheating time and more completely heat the oven cavity. Very important to understand that when we're preheating the oven, we really don't just want the air temperature in the oven to reach the temperature that we've chosen, but we want the oven cavity to have radiant heat at that temperature, so that when we do open the door of the oven to insert the food that we want to bake or cook, we're not losing all of that heat out into the atmosphere, and then having to recover that heat with the food inserted in the oven, right? Because then you may have to employ the fans to recover the oven, but we don't want to do that because maybe we're baking something that doesn't really do well with convection. So what we want to make sure is that we do is we heat the side walls and the ceiling so that that heat is radiating off the side during the baking process. It allows us not to have to engage the fans to recover the heat. The oven will maintain a more stable temperature so that when you are baking at the temperature that you've chosen, you're baking at that temperature as opposed to an environment that may not be conducive to what you want to cook. So that may mean that at temperatures in excess of 350 degrees, the preheat time on either oven may be slightly longer than you're used to, because we're trying to heat that oven cavity to that consistent radiant temperature. It's very important that so that we can get the best baking or roasting results possible. So fans will be engaged whether we're preheating in still or a convection mode. All right. So let's talk a little bit about those different modes, what they're good for, what they're ideal for, when or when you should not use the probe. Fortunately, there's only a couple of modes that you're not really allowed to use the probe at all, and it's really easy to remember. So that'll be easy for everybody. And then we're going to talk in terms of where the heat is being generated from in the oven, because this is really important when we're talking about how these ovens perform. Remember that the design of these ovens, right, is a collaboration between the chefs at Wolf and Sub-Zero, who they're in Madison, Wisconsin. They're working with the engineers to say, you know, really ideally when we're roasting in a certain mode, we need a little bit of heat from the top, or we need more heat from below so that we can get a more even bake, right? So that's a collaboration. So all of these modes are essentially combinations of where the heat is being produced in the oven, and also whether or not the fans are going to be employed in that mode. And each one of those modes is designed for pretty specific goals when we're cooking in the oven. So once we understand sort of what those modes are doing and what they're really designed for, it's going to make your life as the chef in your own kitchen to say, I want to get something that looks beautiful on the outside, but I want to make sure that I cook it exactly right on the inside. We have a mode that's designed for that. And once you kind of have got that in your head and you know it, it's really going to make your cooking much easier, and I think much more satisfying as you're going forward, because you're going to really trust the appliance to come out where you want it to come out. All right, so let's start with those modes that are still modes, where there's no fans. Question? Yes.
In any of like the use and care manuals, does it really break down exactly what's happening within each of those modes?
It doesn't. So in the use and care guide that you'll get with your appliance, you're going to get a list of the different modes. It's going to give you some what's a good use for that particular mode. It's going to say, oh, this is good, obviously, for single plane baking. This is good for multi-plane baking. This is going to be good for slow roasting. This is going to be good for temperature roasting, use of the probe, and all of those things. So doesn't tell you how the oven is performing, but what we are going to be able to provide you with today at the end, we will email out this sheet, and this sheet has literally the different modes, and then tells you where the energy in the oven is being produced, and then its best suited uses over here in this last column, so that when you know that you want to do some roasting of potatoes or other vegetables, what's going to be the best mode for doing that? Or maybe you're slow roasting something, or you're going to want to do different types of baking. There's going to be different modes